This episode of Troxel is supported by Avail. Avail helps AECO firms better manage, organize, and navigate information faster. Visit getavail.com today. This episode of Troxel is supported by Confluence, a small conference event for AEC professionals and technology providers to discuss industry trends and ideas together. It's put on by the fine folks at Avail. You can learn more about the upcoming invite-only events during this episode. This episode is brought to you by Troxel Plus membership. Learn about the benefits of membership and get your limited time launch offer savings at trxl.co/launch20. There's no spaces in that. trxl.co/launch20. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. In this episode, I talk with Radu Gidei. Radu discusses his background in architecture and how it led him to pursue a career in building tools and workflows for the industry, which led to his current role as CTO of KOPE. You might remember KOPE from episode 111 with Mark Thorley and David Flynn, in which we talked about it being a platform that aims to accelerate the adoption of offsite construction. Today, Radu explains KOPE's vision to provide a software platform for designers, builders, and manufacturers to transition from design to construction using prefabricated products for the offsite construction market. Radu also talks about the challenges that contractors and architects face when trying to adopt offsite construction, including the lack of visibility into available construction systems and the risks associated with using new systems on a project. However, and this isn't a bad however, he notes that KOPE's platform does not require people to completely revolutionize their workflows, which you'll hear more about in this episode. Overall, this episode provides insight into the world of offsite construction and how KOPE is working to make it easier for designers and builders to adopt it. So without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Radu Gidei. Radu, welcome to the podcast. Great to see you. Great to meet you. And I'm excited to have a conversation with you. You are the CTO at KOPE, and we've had Mark Thorley and David Flynn previously on the podcast, and they talked about the vision of KOPE and what you guys are doing and the strategy behind it. And today we're going to talk more about the technical side. So this is going to be a great conversation. I would love it if, before we get into that, if you could give a backstory on how you got to where you are. Like what paint a picture of what that journey has been like for you in your career.
For sure. First off, very happy to be on the show. I've been a long time listener, so it's going to be slightly awkward to see my own name pop up there, but it's exciting. So giving you a bit of backstory of how I got to where I am. I guess I have a slightly unusual or different path to what you would see most BIM managers turned techies have taken over the years. So I was born in Romania and I grew up there and did my high school education there. And one of the unique things about that is I went to a high school that's very focused on math and computer science. So I did 4 years of C++ and 1 year of SQL.
Wow.
Before even finishing high school. So they start you off early at 14. And, you do something like 10 hours of computer science a week. So it's that kind of place. So I'd already written quite a bit of code by the time I was 18. And, you even have a programmer's diploma for that. And I didn't want to go into tech because at that point in time and in that place, it mostly meant accounting software or, ERPs or, more traditional software like that. So I decided to go into architecture instead. So I trained like a madman for a couple of years to try and pass the architecture school exam, which consisted of freehand drawing and some technical drawing. Cool things like trying to do a boolean of a cylinder with a sphere by hand on pen and paper.
Right.
Still very traditional back home, right? And yeah, eventually I actually applied to a university in the UK, and that's where I studied my bachelor and master's in architecture in the UK. So I moved when I was 18, studied there, and then started working in architecture practices. Because I had this bit of a background in software, one of the things I did early on was obviously learn CAD and advanced tools to kind of help me in my architectural education. So by the end of my first year, I was very fluent in 3D Max, and I started freelancing doing V-Ray renders for other people and things like that. And naturally, that meant that by the time it came to my first job, I knew Revit quite well, and it was one of the reasons I managed to land that job was to not just be an architectural designer, but also help the practice adopt BIM and move to Revit and these kind of things.
Cool.
So I started my career as an architect, essentially working on mainly educational buildings, so schools, and then later on high-rise residential. But throughout that whole architectural career, I was also doing the BIM side. So I was half and half between the two roles, up until a point where I was like, enough is enough. Got to pick one. It was too much work to try and do both, and I decided to go down the BIM route full time, and that's when I joined Grimshaw to head up BIM at their London office. And yeah, that was a wild couple of years. It was very interesting work, very talented, passionate people. I learned a lot there. We did some very cool things, and it's also how I met Mark and Dave eventually.
Right.
And yeah, following that, I was building more and more automations and tools there. I started getting more into my original love of programming, essentially. So I kind of started doing that on the side a bit, and then at work, and eventually realized actually this is kind of what I want to do.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, leaving Grimshaw, I went full on the tech side of building tools and products for AEC, essentially. And that's how we eventually started MatterLab and KOPE.
Right. It's always interesting to me to hear people's story about kind of this, especially when it includes the architectural aspect to it, and not coming to architecture from the outside, but coming from architecture to tech. And I think that's a common thread in our industry as well, in the people who come on this show, for sure, that there's this kind of initial architect in everybody, and then they pick this specialty. And I think it's interesting when someone like you, I've done a similar thing, is step outside of the practice of architecture to create something for architects. And that to me is always, I don't know what the right word for this is, but it's like working. I frame it as working on the profession rather than working in the profession, and trying to have a bigger impact throughout the profession, or for at scale, as many people as you can affect as possible, for them to have better outcomes in their practice. And I always love hearing stories like that. You also mentioned 3D. You said 3D Max, right? And it's like, I learned 3D Studio before it was Max, and that was running on DOS. And it just brings back all these memories of when I was in college. So I'm totally dating myself, right? But it's that's also fun to hear the tools that people grew up on.
I had I guess an interesting relationship with these tools in architecture schools, where my colleagues at one point, I think this was in my master's, they were quite fascinated by Grasshopper and what it could do, and tools like that. And it was the first time I was exposed to it, and to me it was like, okay, you're just chaining some functions here. Okay. And I just moved on naturally. The ecosystem at that point in time wasn't something that attracted me, and I was very focused on the actual architectural education and the design side of my brain, essentially. But obviously eventually came back to the programming side, and I have to say that Dynamo was actually one of the gateways that kind of brought me back to it.
Yeah, I could imagine.
I kind of refound the joy of doing
and
that.
Being a BIM manager and at Grimshaw, I'm sure was there was a lot of heavy Revit work. I'm sure there is a lot of heavy Grasshopper work as well. But like when you're actually building tools to deliver the construction document side of the equation, you're heavily going to be investing in Dynamo inside of Revit.
Yeah, and we had heavy usage of both sides essentially there. But I think it comes back to that nice framing you had of not working on the architecture itself, but working to help the teams that do the architecture essentially. And that was to me, it's a fairly natural segue, I guess, from doing that BIM work and helping the teams to building the tools that help the teams.
Yeah, and there's this whole, like, architecture school trains people to be designers, and very few people in the architecture industry are designers. There aren't that many designers, and because there's all these other jobs to do. And I think it's an interesting pivot. Like you mentioned it earlier, like you were using the design side of your brain, right? And you're still doing that, but you're doing that to design tools and workflows and automations and things for people to accomplish their tasks. And so I think it's still a great way to express, or it's an expression of that passion to be able to implement tool design, as it were, for others. And I think that's a cool outlet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very creative process, actually, bringing these tools to life. You've got obviously the software engineering side of it, but there's also the user experience side. There's all of these different facets of it. That means I am actually able to bring both of those experiences I've had together to kind of try and come up with something that's really helpful.
It's a very architectural approach. I mean, you have to synthesize all of the different inputs into something, right? And sometimes it's a physical environment as architecture. Sometimes it's a tool, and you're still have to think through all the different aspects of what people want, what people need. There's a series of trade-offs in there versus development time, and there's so many things that go into that, plus user experience. What does it feel like to use the tool? There's so many pieces to that. It is actually, I appreciate what you're saying about it being kind of this architectural process as well.
Yeah, I think that's why you see quite a few ex-architects in product management or UX design, because it is that role where you're trying to bring everything together and kind of orchestrate everything into its final shape.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what you're doing specifically at KOPE with the tools that you're basically the CTO. You are the CTO at KOPE, and tell us about what you're doing there.
So there's three of us co-founders, Mark, Dave, and myself, and we've kind of split the roles between us. So I work as our CTO, essentially looking after our technology strategy and product development. So all the product we're building, it's part of my group. We actually build the software and take care of that entire end-to-end process, essentially. So everything from having our PMs come up with features, then design the UX for it, test with users, build the software, deploy it to our cloud, the whole end-to-end experience, essentially.
Great. And so maybe you can walk us through what KOPE does, because this isn't something we spent a lot of time on when I talked to Mark and David. That was a big picture vision for the industry. There were some larger buckets kind of established about a marketplace and talking about, connecting design to fabrication and modular construction. And there was a lot of kind of big picture stuff, but I want to get more nuts and bolts specific with you about what, and maybe let's go back and like, cause you had an initial vision, and I'm wondering if that has changed over time. How things have changed over time, because change always happens, right? It's you can't perfectly predict where you're going to end up. So maybe take us on a journey of what you've been doing with KOPE over the last several years.
Yeah, it's 100% changed over time, but I would say that the shape of it has changed, but not the vision itself. So we actually had this vision quite early on, and we haven't wavered much from it. of building a platform to accelerate the adoption of offsite construction. So, we started off as a consultancy, building products and tools for our clients, and then gradually building things for ourselves, right? And one of the things we saw in doing this was people wanting to move to offsite construction, whether they're contractors, architects, or manufacturers, but not necessarily having the means to do so, the tools or the know-how or the experience. There were various different kind of roadblocks to them doing that. So we had this vision of like, okay, we can build something here that's kind of bridges that gap in the same way, or addresses the same challenges that we had as an industry adopting BIM, right? Everyone wanted to do it, but there wasn't like a one button solution to how to do it. So could we have another one of those challenges on our hand with offsite construction? And if our thesis is that yes, it's exactly what that will be. So we have to build something to help it make it easier, especially for people to move to that. So it's still in that vein of helping designers design and builders build, and not necessarily building things ourselves in terms of physical construction, but providing a software platform for people to be able to do that. So we started off with this vision of going from all the way from a site to a finished building, and employing offsite construction at every step of the way, and doing a lot of the heavy lifting through computational design and generative design and all of these other techniques. And we haven't really wavered from that much. We actually have a sketch on a whiteboard that we did back in January 2020, I think, of all the components that would be needed and all the moving pieces. And we thought it was too ambitious at the time. So we said, okay, what's the smallest version of this we could build? And we started with what we now call our workflow engine, which is basically a computation engine in the cloud. Think of it as Dynamo in the cloud, if you will, right? Where instead of having very small nodes that deal with, make a cube or make a rectangle, we're working at a kind of the next level of abstraction where you're dealing with products or systems that you apply to a building. So you're dealing with the wall system or the internal partitions or the floor, essentially. And you orchestrate these things together into a workflow to be able to then automate this transition from design to construction using prefabricated products and techniques.
This episode is brought to you by Avail. Avail is the content management system you deserve. With its beautifully simple interface, Avail makes it easy to manage, organize, find, and use your information. Designed by designers for designers and engineers, the Avail platform takes advantage of visual acuity, allowing for a visual audience to identify what they need in a couple of clicks. Avail is designed to serve any content type from any file location and allow for simple, fast deployment of your content. Plus, thanks to powerful integrations with Revit and other applications, you can seamlessly incorporate Avail into all your workflows. Say goodbye to the headache of locating and managing content and say hello to efficiency. To learn more, visit getavail.com. Avail, the information you need faster. So how prevalent are prefabrication outfits where you're targeting? I assume you're really based out of the UK, so you're really targeting UK-based contractors or prefab facilities and companies. So there's got to be a market there, and I'm just wondering, because there are some in the United States as well, but I can't imagine that there's enough saturation in that market here to, and you tell me, I mean, maybe I'm completely wrong, but there's got to be, it has to be a pretty big market for you to chase after that so specifically.
It is a very big market, and I think it's only going to get bigger. And one of the reasons for that is adoption of these products and ways of building has been hampered, by a couple of challenges, and that's what we're trying to address. So if we're successful with our endeavor, we will make the market bigger as well. We will help everyone use these things more, and they will kind of, have a snowball effect almost. We are most prevalent in the UK and the US at the moment.
Okay.
So we have customers on both sides of the pond. And yeah, I guess there are differences between the two markets. So in the UK, you would see products like precast concrete slabs used a bit more, or, different wall cassettes. In the US, you might have different names. You might call, drywall versus plasterboard and things like that. But you might use a lot more timber framing systems for offsite. But I think there's still a heavy usage on both sides. It's just not visible, essentially. So contractors are using these systems, but a lot of times they only use one or two systems that they know of, or that they've worked with before, or that they've seen their colleague use before, essentially. So there's a real barrier to finding other systems that you might be using and adopting them, because it's a risk, obviously, on a project to use a system you've never used before. And on the architectural side, there's also not a lot of knowledge of these systems either. And we call this challenge the visibility challenge, that you don't have visibility into what the supply chain has to offer, and what construction systems you might be able to actually make use of to improve the outcome of your building.
And I think a lot of contractors are probably coming from a place of, well, obviously a long history and experience in the industry, and they probably came through a trade, right? They specialized in a trade, but now you're talking about orchestrating as a GC a lot of trades together, plus new ways of building, right? And so it has this compounding effect of risk, like you're talking about, because when you're talking about prefabricated thing, you're talking about assemblies, you're talking about even modules, right? And you're not talking about going in to do a job that is a very specific trade on a larger job site. You're talking about creating products and delivering through logistics those products onto site. And because they're assemblies, they're probably big products, right, that get delivered to these sites. And so it is probably a whole new world for a lot of contractors out there. But I'd be interested to hear, like you say, it's only getting bigger. What is that adoption looking like? What is that curve looking like?
I think there's a couple of blog posts on our website that kind of talk about the adoption and give you some metrics that I don't have off the top of my head. But to kind of paint a picture, I think one of the things that we're most excited about for KOPE is it doesn't require people to change their workflows and completely revolutionize how they work. So what I mean by that is contractors are already orchestrators of different subtrades. So for example, in the UK, some of the tier one or largest contractors we have, they don't physically necessarily build, they subcontract a lot of things out. So you might have someone else being subcontracted to deliver the floor package, someone subcontracted to deliver the interior partitions package. Now, they might actually have builders that come on site and work, but a lot of times it's this kind of orchestration of other trades and other materials that go into a building. So with Offsite, what we're trying to do is make it easier for contractors to basically find the right offsite supplier that could fulfill that package of work, essentially. So if you're looking, for example, for how do I make my floor a bit more emission friendly, lower carbon? How do I make it lighter? Is there another system I could use to kind of fulfill some of these specifications or performance targets I have better than the design I always go to, which is maybe poured concrete or something else? So this visibility challenge that we're tackling with our marketplace, where we enable people to go there, find the right supplier for the right system that they're looking for, and use that in their building. It doesn't have to be a fully prefabricated building, but you can partially adopt these things for your various parts of the building.
So when you say marketplace, and I got this, I gleaned this from the previous episode with Mark and David, but the idea of a marketplace is also a kind of a phone book of connections in the industry. It's not just a place to go find products or technology, it's a place to go find people as well. And so then you have this ability to connect. And this is a lot of in alignment with the work that I'm doing at Tech, which is when I don't know what I don't know, who do I need to talk to so that I get off on the right foot? And I think it's so interesting as a technology company delivering a product for offsite construction as well, that you're actually creating the connecting points so that people can be more successful in their business when they're delivering this kind of productized architecture almost, or buildings in these larger assemblies of components. And that, to me, you're doing this hand-holding for the benefit of the whole industry. You're connecting the dots. You're helping them help themselves, right? And offer a wider range of services or products that they could potentially deliver to a client.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why the marketplace is free. There is no kind of gate to access it. We saw it as a catalyst for the industry to adopt Offsite and shed some light into the supply chain, what it can do, because there are some fantastic buildings out there that have used Offsite products and systems. So if we showcase them, connect that to who were the suppliers on that, who were the consultants on that as well. So you have this interconnected set of data where you can see a project you liked, find a supplier for it, find the consultants, maybe on the architectural side or the structural side. So it really kind of can help you establish some of those connections. We have tools to put you in touch with them directly. And that obviously brings us to the second part of our product, which is KOPE Construct, which is the step you would take after you find something you're interested in. So if I have a design I'm looking to build and I find, okay, I've got these two floor suppliers that I'm interested in. One might be a timber wall cassette, the other might be a precast concrete slab, wildly different. How would these apply to my design?
Right.
So that's where KOPE Construct kicks in, and this is where our workflow engine and all of the automation tools and computational design that we've done over the years kind of applies to basically help you pick a product, upload a BIM model, apply that product to that BIM model. And we're really striving for it to be as simple an experience as that.
So can you explain how that kind of works? Because the idea, at least in my mind, is that the design team is going to come with a fairly generic set of models so that when they select the appropriate construction system, it might go back and modify their design model a little bit based on different constraints of different assemblies, right? So if you had a concrete floor cassette versus a CLT floor cassette or something like that, those would have different constraints to them, which could change the layout. And so you don't want to overdo it on the design side, at least early. You want to keep it like loose as much as you can, but still be going down a design direction. Can you talk about how that negotiation, that back and forth happens, and how you help facilitate that so that people aren't redoing their work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's this kind of nicely segues into one of the second challenges we see with offsite construction, which is, we call it variation, where it's very easy to produce 1 million of the same house, manufacture it, repeatable, all the same. It's very hard to basically say, I have this base design, but I need this wall moved by 1 meter for this one house, and I need this floor higher for this other variation of the design. So it's very hard to accommodate these variations, which is kind of why we talk about the mass customization side of it. So coming back to that workflow and how do we keep people from going back and forth, we actually want to enable them to go back and forth a little bit, but at speed. So that's the trick. So in an ideal world, you would design the building with a specific system in mind for every single part of the building from day one, and it would get built, and that would be amazing outcomes.
Right.
Exactly. Right. In reality, that's not what happens, right? For the vast majority of buildings, like along various points in the design, you might think, could I use an offsite system for this? So we're basically trying to build on-ramps at these various points to allow you to go in at any point and say, I want to test some products for this part of my building. It could be multiple systems at the same time. So we've had workflows where we've done floors, walls, ceilings, other things at the same time, or it could be just one of these systems. But the idea is to enable you to test how the product would work in your specific building, taking into consideration the rules and the constraints of that particular product, right? And give you very rich metrics to be able to then make designs and decisions, whether you want to tweak the design, whether you want to tweak the product configuration, and kind of keep going.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask right there if there is a method behind the digital, or if there's a companion to the digital side, which is the people side, to actually tap into the wisdom of the fabricator or the general contractor or the designer, right? This kind of two-way communication that's so important to know what the potential pitfalls are, what the constraints are for the system. Because when you say tweak a system, it's like, that can mean a million different things, right? And you would want to talk to somebody right then and say, what can I do? What can't I do? What's the question I should be asking? Because these are the kinds of, this wisdom exists in the industry, and it's leaving the industry without getting captured anywhere, right? And that's a side problem that I don't know that you guys are addressing or even have the ability to address, or if anybody does, because nobody's really doing it, right? But this whole idea of connecting to the wisdom side along with the tools so that people make the best decisions, because often we find that the tools or the products or the data itself doesn't offer that insight that we need from somebody who has the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see this problem of brain drain in the industry, but also sheer workforce drain. There just aren't enough people to go around to build these things. And the knowledge of how these things are built is getting lost. So part of our approach is, when we work with a manufacturer to put their system up on KOPE, is we work directly with that team that has that know-how. And again, when you work with a manufacturer, it might not be one person. There might be someone that knows very well how the thing actually gets assembled or built on the factory floor. There might be other people that know more about the design constraints of this thing. There might be other people that know about the logistics of this particular piece of a construction. So we work with that entire team, essentially, to try and capture as many of those facets of a product as possible, to basically package it up as the configurable product you see in KOPE, essentially. So when you're working with a product in KOPE, and for example, you see a slider for a particular parameter or some aspect of that product, you know that someone's spoken to that manufacturer and knows what the minimum and maximum is, and there's a reason it's those values. So you can't essentially go outside of what's permissible in that system.
Yeah, so you basically get a great starting point of realistic expectations in what the parameters are that are changeable, right? And then if it's something, if I have an idea that goes outside of that, that's when I would want to connect with somebody and talk to them.
Yeah, and there might actually be another step in between. So one of the really cool things we have in KOPE is our optimization engine. So when you go to apply one of these products to your building, you always have an immediate start. You have default values for everything. You can just press go and see what be a good starting point. Then you can tweak it and find, actually, if I tell KOPE I want slightly higher spacing for some of these internal studs or things in a wall cassette, I might get a more efficient layout, right? Where our optimization engine kicks in is it allows you to basically automate a lot of that heavy lifting and a lot of that back and forth, essentially. So we have a very simple interface that allows people to say, I want these three things to vary, to essentially to change their values in ways that are acceptable. And I have these 5-10 goals in mind. I want minimal waste. I want maybe minimal cost, but you might be making different trade-offs in different types of designs. And then you press run, you run our optimization, so engine on top of this. So we basically apply that product to your building thousands and thousands of times in the cloud. We come back with what is an optimal set of designs. And you can obviously explore those designs and find the right trade-offs for your particular building, save that design, and then continue working with the outputs, essentially. So one of the things, going back to that idea of the back and forth between design tools, where probably the only one that I can think of right now, platforms out there that uses IFC as input and output. So we don't use it as a kind of dead-end format. We take it as an input, we work with it, and we give you IFC back so that you can actually integrate it back into your design tools and use those outputs directly.
Let's stick on that for a minute. How has IFC been to work with? I mean, it's basically is it okay? So you're smiling. Tell us what you're thinking when I ask that question.
Yeah, it's a sticking point in the industry, in the conversation right now, isn't it? It's not a perfect standard by any means. It's a decent schema. It is bloated. It is hard to work with. It's got complexities and layers, but it does quite a few things right, quite a few things wrong. Its redeeming quality is that it is the only one that pretty much everyone agrees on, and most software packages accept. So there's really only two approaches here. Either you make three, let's say. Either you have some closed source proprietary format that only you know about, or you have some kind of open schema that you tell people about and everyone has to adopt yours,
right?
Or you use this common standard, right? This is only one of these three. We've tried all three, and we've kind of ended up in a slightly hybrid world, but at the end of the day, we wanted to maximize compatibility with our customers' tools.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to limit it to only ArchiCAD users or only Navisworks users or this or that. So we made a trade-off of, okay, let's spend quite a few engineering months on this problem, trying to build tools that work with these complicated IFC schemas. But the end result is that customers can upload these things directly to our product and kind of hit the ground running.
And when you're talking about your
obviously
customers, you're talking about the design side or the construction side or both?
A bit of both. So our customers are both from the contractor side or the manufacturing side, right? There's some usage from the more kind of design architectural side, but that's not necessarily our core audience at this point in time. It's mainly manufacturers that want to speed themselves up. For example, when they respond to a tender, they would use our tool to actually automate their own process and respond to that tender, in 5 minutes, not 5 days. Or contractors on the other side of the fence who would, similarly test different products to kind of apply to the building.
Right. So are you, staying on the IFC thing for a minute, are you actively contributing back into that ecosystem of the standard to help it get to where you see it needing to go? Or is there a wall there that you're not willing to go through?
I think it's less about willingness and more about time and opportunity and, doing it at the right moment. So at the moment, we aren't contributing in the sense that we're not, part of building Smart or trying to influence the standard itself, because we just have too much to build and we need to move too quickly.
Yeah, I get that.
So, it's a fairly stable standard. It takes years for it to change. So it's going to be around for quite a while. So for us, the priority is obviously to build for our customers as quickly as we can.
Yeah. Now,
but that doesn't mean that we won't be looking to contribute in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that is a key component to it, right? It's like architects complaining about the AIA, but they're also members of the AIA saying, what are you doing for us? And it's like, well, what are you doing to help steer the AIA as a member too. And it's not dissimilar from that, in that the building smart people who are participating in that are also contributing to steering where it goes. But I know it's also there. It is very slow moving, and I can imagine that's really frustrating for bleeding edge tech companies to participate in as well, when they also have to build a product. And I mean, it's complicated. I totally get it.
Yeah. And, another way to look at participation is actually putting out a tool that has good support for IFC input and output and uses it as the kind of the pass-through format. There isn't much out there that does that. There's viewers for IFC, and we're seeing some really cool things come out of the open source community with the Blender BIM side of things and IFC.js. But there aren't many tools that kind of use it as an input and then allow you to do stuff with it. Conic recently, another startup, has been doing some really interesting things there. So I think even just having robust support for this is already kind of contributing somewhat to that conversation and to that discussion, and enabling people to say, okay, we can invest and we can follow this route as well.
Yeah.
Because it would have been much easier for us to just come up with our own closed format and call it a day.
So ultimately, you decided to go down the IFC route for that, and I'm just wondering if that's something your customers have given you feedback on. Because I can imagine there's a good number of them. They're like, what is IFC? Like, they don't even know that it's maybe there. But then I'm sure there's other feedback that you've gotten that has shown you that you made a good decision in this, to go down that road.
Yeah, and it's been less direct, as in it's not like customers going like, oh my God, you support IFC? Right. Yes. It's more like, I want to use your tool, and I use these 5 tools. Can your tool connect to these? And being able to say yes, because 4 out of 5 of those export IFC, the other one does something else we can work with. That's what customers appreciate, not having to change their workflow too much, essentially, and being able to retain the investment that, frankly, they've done over years into their tools, right? So practice adopting Revit or ArchiCAD, they have years of investment in training and standards and those things, and being able to just press export IFC is great for them. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on the IFC side, but we do support direct Revit uploads as well. So for us, it's all about giving users the least amount of friction to start playing with our platform and using it and getting the benefits of it.
Yeah, sure. This episode is sponsored by Confluence. I've invited Randall Stevens, the CEO of Avail, to tell you about it.
In 2019, we held the inaugural Confluence event, which was designed to bring together the product managers, the technology developers that are working on the products used daily in the AEC industry, and put them in the room with the design technology leaders from the practice side that are actually implementing and using these technologies. The goal isn't to sell anybody anything at these events. The goal is to get a better understanding of what's working, what's not working, and what would be the best products to develop to be implemented in the AECO industry. We've held these 3-day Confluence events the past 4 years and attracted over 100 attendees. We have an exciting agenda plan for our annual event in October. The theme this year is going to be focused around AI and machine learning and its applications in the AEC industry. You can learn more about Confluence at getavail.com/confluence.
So I think we've talked enough about IFC, to your point, and I just think it's an interesting side route that we went down there, that we had the opportunity to go down. Yeah. But I'm wondering, you talk about the tools that you're making, and you're talking about different components and assemblies, and can you give us an idea of the types of projects people are actually doing with KOPE, so that we have something that we can put a picture in our mind to, like what kinds of buildings, what sizes of buildings, what kinds of spaces, and things like that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that the cool answer to that is that we've seen pretty much anything in there. So we've seen single family residential, for example. We're working with a manufacturer from Canada, actually, who mostly applies their system to kind of, detached houses, as they're called in the UK. And it's a single family's home, essentially. So, and we do the entire exterior envelope, essentially, with these wall cassettes. That's at one end of the spectrum. You might even use it for smaller things, such as inside one of your apartment layouts or something like that. You might want to do your internal partitions from using a particular system, or you might want to optimize your plasterboard or drywall usage, where we have some fantastic results in kind of reducing waste there. So it could be as small as 3 walls, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, where we have commercial office building towers in London that we're looking at precast concrete slabs, for example, and a few other systems. And they were able to save a large amount of money, to not break any rules here.
Nice.
What I'm allowed to say.
Can we talk about that drywall example for a second? I'm interested to hear that, because I think a lot of times coming at the problem from an architect's point of view, I read an article recently. It's like architects aren't going to save the world. And it was speaking to, the carbon emissions and sustainability and one project at a time, kind of coming at it back and saying, we want to save the world. We should do everything we can to implement sustainable practices, renewable energy, lightweight systems that, the things that you can take apart later. Think about the whole building life cycle on every project. Yeah. Ultimately, our clients are paying for something. Oftentimes, they want the cheapest thing that they can get right now, because they're not interested in the 50-year life cycle of the building, because they're not going to be around then, as an example. And so what is our part in that? And just trying to kind of say, can we just be realistic about that? Now, at the same time, as an architect coming at the problem and saying, look, by using this tool, I've saved the project, or I've given the project the ability to use less drywall, because we're reusing the waste pieces in another manner. But then when a contractor takes over, they're just going to do it how they do it, right? And so your audience is the contractor. So I think you're coming at this from the other side and saying, our contractors are buying into this idea. They're looking at the savings, the waste, reusability that they can. It's not really waste anymore, right? It's getting put back into the project. So kind of talk through what you're seeing happen in the industry there, because I love hearing that that's coming from the contractor side.
Yeah, and I have a pretty good anecdote, I guess, with usage on both the contractor and offsite builder side, actually. So I'll get into that in a second. But to your wider point of what can architects do and what should we be doing, I think one of the reasons we approach KOPE the way we do is and allow you to do these kind of partial updates or partial applications of a product to a building. So take only this wall, or only look at floors in this area, or look at all the internal partitions that have this type of code, essentially. One of the reasons we're approaching that is because not every building is a brand new building that's going to be built using the system from scratch, right? It might be a renovation. It might be that actually the shell and core are already up, and it's later in the design stage that where they're even hearing about this tool or getting a chance to use it. So actually supporting all of those different points in the life cycle of a building it is, I think, one of the ways we could be looking at this. So not everything is built from scratch. Not everything has to be decided from day one. Some of these things can actually be swapped in and out later on. And you can try to find solutions where you might normally not look for them, essentially. Coming back to that analogy with the contractors and the offsite builder. So obviously contractors would like to eliminate waste, save money on the plasterboard, and especially time, essentially. So if you can come up with a good layout that kind of optimizes for installation speed and minimal amount of cuts, it might use a tiny bit more material, but you might have less waste and be 30% faster, for example. So this is where, we've seen usage of our optimization engine kick in, and be able to surface these options that they hadn't considered before, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we might have, we've worked with an offsite builder who was using modular. So they were building volumetric modules. And obviously they needed something for their internal partitions, and they were using plasterboard, but they had an automated cutting line, right? So all of a sudden you don't really mind as much if you have to do complex cuts anymore. So we were able to essentially take that into account and optimize for simple versus complex cuts. And, is it a human cutting? Is it a machine cutting? To have different trade-offs of speed and waste material, essentially. So that you maximize your outcomes for your particular set of circumstances.
I would imagine also at that point, you're actually talking about dollars to produce something, right? Whereas that's very conceptual on the design side. And when the contractor sees it and you're saying, there's a checkbox for complex cuts versus simple cuts. And what does that mean? Because I think we only do simple cuts. And then you can actually have a conversation about the cost and the ROI for implementing a system like that into their outfit that they maybe don't have already. I think that's a really interesting kind of outcome that can happen during this process.
And it has, we've seen our customers do exactly that. So, we obviously produce highly detailed outputs and highly detailed takeoff from those outputs. So very accurate dollar numbers and quantities and all of these things. But the cool thing about that is, going back to our optimization engine, it allows people to say, I don't know what this simple or complex cut thing does. So I want to play around with that, vary that a bit. I also don't know if I should cut my plasterboard at the edge of a door or in the middle of a door, or should I consider rotating things 90 degrees? Is that more efficient? I have no clue.
Right.
So they say, okay, I want these things to vary, and what are your goals then? Well, I would like to minimize for cost, for example. So then you're able to run these things in KOPE and see what kind of results are produced for what kind of different inputs and trade-offs. So you can then spot, okay, actually the complex cut thing is making the cost double because, I don't know, I'm just giving an example here, but you might see that actually rotating the panels in certain circumstances gives 5% saving. So it kind of gives you the opportunity to find out what the best application of a particular product might be. Because it's like you said earlier, manufacturers know how that product works, but the architect might not be familiar with it, right? So it's about giving them the space where they can explore, they can play with it. You can kind of get to start to learn how the system works and optimize it for your own particular needs.
When you're creating that optimized, and I'm going to put that in my famous podcasting air quotes, because you have talked to somebody to figure out what the optimal way to do something is. That's one data point, right? You might talk to another contractor and they'd be like, what are you talking about? This way is way faster, better, whatever. And so then you get additional data points to inform maybe options in how you approach things, or maybe you decide, nope, this is the best way based on outcomes that we've seen or the things that we've measured, for example. I think it's so interesting because I've gone through the same thing. If I remodel a room in my house and I need to re-drywall it, I would do it a certain way based on my experience or what I think, maybe my preconceived ideas. But if I have somebody who come in who's done drywall for 30 years, which I did, and they say, nope, we do it like this. And it was like kind of mind-blowing to me to say, oh, that's how the pros do it. That is way different than what I thought. Because I don't work in that trade. I don't do that every single day. And then I even get to say why, right? Because that's the important part. Well, why do you do it like that? Oh, here's 5 reasons why we do it like that. And so now you're doing that on behalf of the design teams so that you get this optimized output by having those conversations with contractors up front. They're sharing that information with you to their benefit because they're the ones buying this product potentially, right? So I'm just interested in that the way that all kind of happens and unfolds. And you've been able to ask the questions behind the scenes of how and why do you do it like this. And I think that is always something that comes late in the game in traditional construction practices, which is like, I drew this detail, here's how I want you to build it. And the contractor's like, we don't build like that. We don't do it like that. We do it like this. And we only learn that at the end. But what you're doing is you're injecting that optimization into the beginning.
Yeah, because it's that all that knowledge and know-how is basically embedded into that product and how it's applied, right? So the second you apply it, you're using that extracted knowledge and experience. And one of the funny things with something as simple as plasterboard is, like you said, the pros do it one way, but then you figure out actually the pros do it a different way in the UK versus the US. Sure. And actually, if they use this particular brand of plasterboard, then they actually do it slightly differently again, because that manufacturer has, I don't know, some weird edge, or, they make the panel slightly wider than the rest, or something like that. So it's all of these little moments of knowledge that get embedded into these products. And you get to benefit from that when you apply them, sometimes without knowing. Other times, when you run them enough times, you start to suss it out yourself. So it gives you a glimpse into the black box a bit. You start to kind of reverse engineer it in your head, if you will. If you've applied the same thing to a wall 100 times, you start to spot the patterns. So you might understand how that product works. But the idea is that we're trying to kind of shrink down that manufacturer and put them next to you on your desk every time you try to play with one of these products.
It's this whole co-pilot thing we're hearing everybody use the word, right?
Yeah.
Recently with the AI, you've got KOPE.ai. You must be using AI. You must have a co-pilot too, right? That's what you're talking about. But this idea of having that expertise available in the as a co-creation in the process of designing a building, I think it's an appropriate analogy to make. And I love how you kind of framed it as shrinking them down and making them available all the time right there on your desk.
I mean, I'd love to have a little talking version next to me on my desk, right? That tells you, no, don't do that.
I think architects,
this is as close to it as we can get.
Architects already have that. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. No, don't do it like that. You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. Yeah. That's the life of an architect.
It mainly takes the form of Revit errors, but
right. Warnings and errors. Yes. Are you sure?
Exactly.
Are you sure you want just a little slap on the hand every time? Yeah, a physical manifestation.
You've done that wrong, so
right.
We'll give you the option to delete everything.
You mentioned a couple of project types. Are there larger project types that this is being implemented on as well? These the construction, are they doing it on mid-rise, high-rise, and these prefabricated cassettes? I can only assume the answers.
Yeah, so on the commercial side, we've seen it on high-rise offices in London, so quite large buildings. We've also seen this used for large span buildings, so monster warehouses or things like that. Not necessarily warehouses, but a very long and wide building with only one floor essentially. Mm-hmm. And by one floor, I mean one extra floor apart from ground floor, just to be extra clear.
Yeah.
So it's kind of every typology in between.
Okay.
And that's part of the beauty of it, that it's fairly agnostic in terms of what type of building you use, because it's not about the type of the building, but about the construction system that you're applying.
And so when you're talking about these components, these assemblies, these cassettes, I think about manageable size components. But when you're talking about designing a building, you're talking about a site, you're talking about a structural system, you're talking about some of these larger components. Are you dealing with those as well?
We are dealing with some structural components already, yes. So I'm trying to think what the right example would be, but some of these systems are already structural. So there are, for example, we have SIPs and CLT systems that are load bearing, and you have to take that into consideration. There's obviously the precast concrete stuff is structural, And this is where, just having a floor that you're applying these things to isn't enough. You need to know about the columns in that building and some of these other elements, which is why we take in that entire BIM model as the input, and you take those things into consideration. So you're then able to go around the columns or, whatever it is that product needs to do essentially to get a good layout.
I know we're getting close to our time here, but I would love it if you could explain, and maybe as a final chapter in this episode, kind of what the user experience is like. You tapped into that earlier on in the conversation when you're designing your tools, but paint a picture for someone who is a user of KOPE, and maybe you can do it from a couple of different vantage points on the construction side, maybe on the design side. I know they're probably a little different, but what do people experience when they're using KOPE? And talk about what it's actually like. Like, what is this running on your computer? Is it running in the cloud? Just talk through that general scenario of the day in the life of a KOPE user from a couple of different vantage points.
That's a great question. Let me see if I can do it justice. Okay. So first things first, KOPE is all cloud-based. So everything we do is running in the cloud. Nothing runs on your computer. And the way you interact with our software is through your browser. So the marketplace has one particular web app that you're interacting with, and our KOPE Construct product is another one, and they're interlinked. So coming back to the user journey, let's assume you're a contractor, right? And you have a license of KOPE, and you get a new project in, and maybe it's a tender stage, or maybe it's even on site, and you're just trying to figure out. I think there might be a better way to do these internal partitions, right, than this kind of frame,
stick frame or something,
timber framing plus, exactly, right? So you have this idea like, okay, I might want to try something out here, right? So you go onto the KOPE marketplace, and you go to the regional one for US or UK, wherever you're based, and you might look for things that apply to walls. So you might look for any type of system that can do internal partitions. You might say, I want this to be within, the supplier for this to be within 100 miles of this particular address, because I want to keep logistics and kind of transport low for environmental impact reasons. And you might want to, add other filters to kind of find the right supplier to say, I want them to be accredited with this particular thing. And, all of these other things that we give you to kind of find the right supplier. You then find a couple of them, you might compare them, you might look at the projects they've done. You might, then actually some of them might have what we call a flex configurator, which is a configurator that you can use in isolation without a project. So it's just kind of a little sandbox environment to get a sense of what their system might be like. So you play around with those, and you narrow it down to, let's say, two manufacturers. One's a timber wall cassette, and the other is let's say a SIPS provider. Right? Okay. And you add them to what we call a supply chain. So it's kind of like a favorites or a bookmarks folder, right? The cool thing about KOPE is that everything you do is collaborative, in the sense that you are within your company account, and all of your colleagues can see all of these things you're doing. So as soon as I've created that supply chain, I give it a name, and these suppliers go into that supply chain. My colleagues can find it the next time they log on.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Right. So I might say this is a supply chain for this particular project, or it might be for this region, or it might be for whatever reason you want, essentially. Now, after you've chosen these suppliers, the next step would be, okay, I want to test this out on my particular project. So you go into KOPE Construct, you create a new project, you give it the address, you upload your BIM model. We process that model, we give you a 3D viewer to interact with it to see what the preview looks like. And then you go into the configurator, essentially. And this is the step where you say, I want this building to be used as the input. And I want to use products from this particular supply chain. So it'll be one of the two suppliers I've shortlisted, essentially. And I want to apply it to internal partitions in this building, essentially. We give you all the knobs and kind of sliders and controls to tweak that design if you want. But by default, you would just press run.
And just based on the classification of the objects that are in the BIM model that you uploaded, you're replacing those with something else from this other supply chain that workflow that you created. Okay.
So, the product you've selected already knows it gets applied to internal partitions, for example. So when you press run, we take your model, we run all of this computation in the cloud. We take all of those partitions, we kind of isolate them from the building. We apply the product to that, so we panelize it and we create all the internal studs and all of the things that might go into that product. And then we give you the output model that you can just drop in to overlay precisely onto that input model, essentially. And aside from the actual BIM model that is produced, you also get very rich metrics. So number of panels, number of cassettes, square meterage of things, costs, all of these other metrics to help you make a decision.
And where are those costs coming from? Are those costs coming from the panel manufacturer, and are they updated very often? Because to me, there's the whole idea of files, right, is that it's kind of dead as soon as you hit save, right? And so if you have the old costs and they're not the new costs, what good is it? So I would just love it if you would plug in to hear how you implement that side of it, because that's so important to actually make a decision whether you're going to use this or not at this point.
Yeah, and there's a companion experience to all of this, which is from the manufacturer side, where they create and upload their products onto our platform, and that's where they tell they input the cost and all of these metrics, and it's a fully versioned experience. So actually, they have a very cool experience of creating a product, and when they're ready, they hit publish. They make it available publicly or not. So we still allow people to actually keep things private if they want to. And, they might work on a version 2 of their wall cassette. They might start tweaking the parameters or the cost, or, maybe the length has changed or something like that. And they could have 15 versions in between. And then when they're ready, they go like, okay, I'm now ready. I'll hit publish again. So we publish a version 2 that the other users might.
So you're relying on them, though, to update their information as if it were cost, as the example. They do need to go in and keep up to date. And are they doing that? I mean, that to me seems like something they would want to keep their finger on the pulse of, because if people are using their panelizing configurator for their system, they want to make sure that their potential future customers have the right information.
Exactly, and that's actually why we have this kind of self-serve experience for allowing manufacturers to control some of these things, because they wanted to be able to tweak these settings without having to go through us, essentially, right? So we try to remove ourselves from the process as much as we can and let the two sides interact directly. So manufacturers keep that up to date because it's in their interest to kind of keep it up to date. So coming back to the contractor side, I've now applied this wall cassette to my internal partitions, and I switch it out for the other product that I saw, maybe the SIPS one. I apply it again, play with the sliders again. I can run optimization on this and decide, actually, I like option number 17 out of this. That fits my things perfectly. So I save these two results. And I like that you mentioned the dead files comment, because this is a very live environment with manufacturers tweaking their products constantly. So we've built this feature of creating these snapshots of your results, where you save one of these things and it's there for perpetuity, not tweakable. Essentially. If you want to tweak it, it can go back into the configurator and you continue tweaking it, but it's there kind of safely stored, so you can always get back to it.
So at this point, if I have these two options, has it gone through your optimization engine yet or not?
Yeah, it could have. Okay. It could have gone already. So you could save, one of the options that our optimization engine produced, or you could use that as a base to then tweak the inputs and some of the parameters further and get something even more custom. And the idea is that once you are happy with one of these, you save it, and that's what's not tweakable anymore. But you can always go back and tweak it further.
No, you need the ability to have a snapshot. It can't be live all the time.
Exactly.
Like we decided, this is the thing we decided, and we're going to move forward with that.
Yeah. And this very much echoed the kind of the BIM workflows, from the international ISOs of, you have your work in progress area and you have your actual approved area that's kind of been saved.
Sure.
I'm not saying we're replacing a CD. These things should still go in there, but it kind of helps you kind of manage this life cycle of experimenting and then getting to a point that you like.
Yeah.
So now that we've had these two products applied to my building, I want to choose one of them, right? So I will put them in our comparison tool, and it will give the numbers side by side and tell me, okay, this one's got 23% wastage, this one's got 15, but this one costs more. And you're able to kind of make that comparison. At any point, you're able to take these outputs and actually save them, get a JSON, CSV, Excel file out, you get your, raw geometry out, all of these things, we will happily produce. So you've done your comparison, and now you're basically at the point where you found a product you like. It's a good layout, it saves you some money and some time. What's the next step? Well, the next step of this would be that you might want to get some either more detailed metrics or some other kind of outputs from this design. So you go to what we call a deliverables section. And this is where you can produce further outputs from this design. So if we take our internal partition example, this is where I can say, I now want drawings of each one of those wall cassettes. And what we do here is actually quite magical, really, where you say, you kind of configure your drawing. You say, I want A3 sheets, I want these things on the title block, I want a top view and a side view, I want my dimensions to be running, not segmented, or all of these settings. And you hit run again, and we produce that drawing on demand for every single one of those wall cassettes with a BOM on the title block, and producing both PDFs and DWG, so you put it into your CAD system or your factory floor if you have a factory.
I think I have.
And that's just one example.
Let me just switch over here. I'm going to insert this into.
Okay.
Can you hear that? There's an applause going on right now, and the reason I put the applause in is because this whole idea of automating the drawing side is so overdue, and it's so interesting to me that architects still are competing on doing construction documents. That is not where their value lies. Their value, there may be decisions that are documented in those construction documents on how a certain detail needs to work out, or how the assembly or the performance, but it's not in actually doing the drawing. And so it's just music to my ears to hear you say that
that's great to hear.
Automate the whole sheet system and the drawings and the output, because that is not where we should be spending our time competing, like actually spending our time, which we bill for on projects. We should be billing for things that are way more important than that.
Exactly. And, we produce these drawings like for every individual assembly, essentially. But what we're working on right now is actually producing general arrangement drawings as well. So a kind of a full floor plan to see how these things are laid out in floor plan. And the real beauty of this is it's a drawing engine, really, where our components come in as IFC components, and we don't know much more about them. And yet we're still able to dimension them accurately, every single notch, and not have overlapping dimensions. And we're architects at heart, so the drawings that we spit out are clean, nice drawings that you would not be embarrassed to show to your associate.
Nice, yeah, that's a good extra.
That's
extra
the kind
cool
of the benchmark.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's taken us a long time to get to this level where the drawings are so crisp and usable, and so you produce all of these outputs, right, for your design. At this point, you can pretty much move into whatever tool you want. You can go back to your design tool, tweak your design, and try again. Upload a new design. You could use it as a reference. Okay, I'm super happy with these internal partitions. I'm going to leave them as they are. And one of the important factors here is that, let's say you're using Revit, right? This isn't a Revit family that you can then click edit on and tweak it and, change how it's put together. That would make it go outside of those manufacturing rules, right? This is an IFC file you link in like you would an external file. And that means that all of those kind of manufacturing constraints and rules are still kind of respected, right? Obviously, you can still go into IFC files and edit them. For people that might not know that, probably my favorite tool to do that is Notepad for
Nice.
IFC files that
Okay.
are .ifc extension.
Yeah.
But the idea is that it's a fairly kind of snapshot in moment. This is what the partitions are,
Right.
and from there you have your cost and all of these other outputs. And we're working on other integrations to kind of push it into the next step. But I can tell you that some of our customers were using these to produce basically XYZ files and cutting files that were going straight into their CNC machines.
Let's take a quick break to tell you about our sponsor for this episode, Troxel Plus. Troxel is now offering memberships. That's right, you can now directly support what we're doing here. With the Troxel Plus membership, you will get your own private feed for ad-free episodes of the podcast, the show notes right in your podcast app and in your inbox, your own ad-free copy of every Troxel AEC Tech newsletter delivered directly to your inbox, and additional member-only content over time. For a limited time, there's a special launch offer. Get $20 off your first year when you sign up today. Go to trxl.co/launch20. That's all one word, there's no spaces. trxl.co/launch20 for $20 off your first year, just for you early adopters. The goal here is for Troxel Podcast and the newsletter to add value to our industry and also to you in your career, and you can help make that happen by becoming a member today. Go to trxl.co/launch20. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Yeah, I was going to say there has to be then a connection to the actual production of the items, and at that point you have it. And so once you really nail down the design and these decisions and you've made your way through the different phases of design, at that point that can actually go directly to the manufacturer to produce those parts.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak too much of, our roadmap, I guess, but, you could imagine that this side of the contractor experience will be linked to the manufacturer experience at one point.
Yeah.
From the manufacturer experience, that different user persona, it would actually be a very similar workflow. The difference might be that they might have more detail in the outputs. They might have, G-code spat out and all of these other things. And they might want to keep these things private and not share them with the rest of the marketplace, or they might be doing this to respond to a tender or something like that. But the basic mechanism of select the products, upload your bin file, hit apply, is still the core mechanic, essentially.
And just to be totally clear, because I'm not sure it is totally clear from the listener's perspective, but the initial layout is happening in their tool of choice. It is going round trip through KOPE and then back into their tool of choice. It may be the same tool, it might be a different tool at that point. But but what they're not doing in KOPE is they're not moving the walls around. They're not adjusting geometry that they've drawn somewhere else in KOPE. KOPE is taking that geometry, it's doing the processing to it, it's giving the output that you then link back into the original or another design tool, where you can then look at the original versus the new KOPE optimized version. It might be in a different location, maybe a little bit, maybe something's changed a little bit, and then you would tweak your original model to kind of match that at that point.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
You're not moving walls and doing those things in KOPE at the moment, right? One of our earliest prototypes actually was doing this live in Revit. So you are selecting a wall and saying, I want to use this particular system, and it would respond in almost real time to those changes and kind of recompute in the cloud and come back down and reapply those things to Revit. We're still technically able to do that kind of workflow, but we've seen slightly more demand on the kind of managed process, where you have full versioning for the files you upload, full versioning for the outputs. full version for the actual compute that happens, because that's maybe something that I haven't spoken about yet. But in our workflow engine, we obviously publish a lot of these workflows ourselves, a lot of these things you run, but we actually have the capability for customers to upload their own bit of code, their own bit of logic, and run it in our infrastructure and still make use of the optimization engine and all of these other things. But they can retain complete control of their IP. We have some really cool enterprise solutions for that.
Maybe final question here, and maybe kind of a boring subject, but I'm interested because I think it's just different than what people are used to. How does this change the LOD narrative? Because when you're coming at this from a designer, and again, just the architectural career that I've had, different phases of design equal a different LOD when it comes to BIM, right? So the level of detail that you have to get to, obviously it's a lower number in the early stages and a higher number in the final stages. A lot of people have arguments on the internet about what number should be at what stage and how high that number should go, and all those things. But here it really seems like what you're doing is you're saying, keep it simple and let KOPE handle the level of detail to whatever it needs to be for the manufacturer to make the piece. And the manufacturer drives the level of detail versus the client demanding an LOD, whatever, 400, 500, 800, the mythical exactly. 800. But it's interesting to me for you to say, no, keep it simple on the design side. We'll give the person who's making the thing the level of detail that their machines need to make the thing.
Yeah, and KOPE is completely capable of going all the way down to like every single position of every nail, and we've done that for a volumetric customer, for example, where we actually lay out the points where the robot will actually come and like nail something, right? So it's just a position in space, but it's still in the model, actually. So, we can go into that level of detail, but it's this kind of happy middle ground we found that works best, where it might not be the full level of detail of like what goes into manufacturing, because you don't necessarily need every bolt to see as a contractor, right? But it's also not just a monolithic wall type of solution that you might be drawing a wall in Revit, right? It's this happy medium where it satisfies both what the contractor or we call them specifiers. So it could be contractor or architect or whoever is using the tool to kind of test these designs, and also enough level of detail so that the manufacturer would know how to manufacture it, but it doesn't need to replace their Inventor or CATIA or like SolidWorks files or some of these other things they might have to kind of do some of their solution. It obviously can, but it doesn't have to. So most products will probably be in this happy medium that's useful for everyone. There might be others that actually, there's two versions of the product published. There's a version that everyone can use, which is this happy medium, and there might be a private version the manufacturer has that has the full detail, right? Or vice versa. So it very much depends on the system and the manufacturer, like you mentioned.
And then when you're talking about this type of way of building, and you're talking about offsite construction and industrialized construction techniques and prefabrication, and there's also like the owner side of that equation, which is what if they wanted a quote unquote digital twin, right, of some level of detail of their built project so that they can manage it, do facilities management on it after the fact, do simulations or whatever you might want to do in a digital twin. It seems like the data's there. You just have to decide what level you want to see it at, what and why it would matter based on if the things you might want to do to that building in the future. But like you said, you have the ability to go to every bolt placement, every nail placement, but not everybody needs that kind of detail. And I'm just interested to hear, maybe last thing here is if owners are getting value out of this too that has been unrealized before. Yeah,
I guess it depends on their involvement in that construction and design process, right? So There's various different methods of procurement. So in the UK, you'd have something like design and build, where the end user or client would say, I want this building, and then the contractor would win that and deliver it as a kind of, here's the key, right? So they might be quite hands-off in that process. You might have clients that are actually very sophisticated in terms of their facility management and have specific requirements and all of these things. Another one of these benefits and kind of early decisions we made with KOPE to output actual BIM models of these assemblies and be open with all the data we produce so that you can access it, using either directly downloading it from the result page or through our API, is we give you all the data you want, so you can then put that into your model that you hand over for then the kind of the facility management side. So we're not going to try and go into that, because that's not what we do. There are fantastic tools out there that kind of help you with that transition from as built to facility management, and essentially we've tried to make it as compatible as we can with existing workflows. So our sweet spot is this design to constructability portion, where it's not an early stage feasibility tool. There's plenty of tools out there that do a great job. It's not a kind of a digital twin, like see your sensors overlaid to a model in operations kind of stage. Again, fantastic tools out there. We're in this kind of very underserved part of the market where you're going from a design to construction, and that's when the kind of the rubber meets the road, and you're making that final decision. Okay, this is how that wall will actually be built, irrespective of what the architect might have drawn or what the spec might say. This is the physical embodiment of that construction element.
Right. It's an earlier stage digital twin, or it's a precursor to the actual physical output. Yeah. Fantastic.
And we've had customers use this together with early stage feasibility tools, right? So we've had some of our previous products like Unitize kind of help you do that, and they integrate very nicely with those kind of solutions. So it really is designed to kind of have these on and off ramps at pretty much any point of the design life cycle.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Radu, this has been a fun conversation, and I appreciate sharing everything that you've shared. And I really appreciate just kind of going through the journey of what it's like to use a tool like this and the things that are possible with it, because you are doing, like you just said it, you're serving an underserved area where the rubber meets the road, where the design actually needs to get created, fabricated, built, and to really look to the future of raising the level of production in that way. We need tools that support that. And so kudos to you and the team for making that happen. And so I'm going to send everybody to your website and to follow you guys on LinkedIn and all the other social media where you participate. Is there anything else that you want to let the audience know about, or tell them to send them to, anything like that to wrap up here?
No, I'd just like to say massive thank you for inviting us, and it's been a blast to have this chat. And come talk to us if you want to do Offsite. We love hearing from all sorts of companies that are involved in the construction arena, from architecture to contractors to manufacturers. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Offsite.
All right, Radu, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.